Please welcome to the stage Louis Shepard, Chair of the AFCEA Intelligence Committee, and Letitia A. Long, Chairwoman, Intelligence and National Security Alliance.
Good morning, everyone. Is everybody happy this morning? Get a good breakfast? Good. Well, welcome to day 2 of the annual Intelligence and National Security Summit, put on by AFCEA and INSA. And we're delighted to have you all here. We hope you enjoyed yesterday's program and the networking. How many people went to the networking reception at the end of the day? Very good. There are 14 people still out there on the patio. We'll bring them in. Yesterday, you earned that reception. It was an extraordinary day, I think, for this year's summit. Personally, some of the highlights for me were the dueling. I ducked into both because they were at the same time, breakout sessions on space domain, space acquisition, space intelligence, phenomenal commercial representation of space, and also AI, some really novel insights on AI at that panel. Secondly, the military service intelligence chiefs. That twos panel, if you will, is always a highlight of the year. And General Bob Ashley, moderating it yesterday, had them go through ticking off their top priorities for the upcoming year. I mean, it was essentially like an industry day almost, but their mission priorities. It was fascinating, and I hope that was helpful for everyone. And then, of course, can't fail to mention the Director of National Intelligence, who graced us with a phenomenal, exceptional keynote yesterday morning in Fireside Chat. That session, the little more than an hour she spent with us, is already up on C-SPAN and will be on-demand viewing for you. So I recommend that as well. And you know, year after year, senior leaders in our community view this summit as the go-to forum, demonstrably, for sharing strategic insights with their most critical partners. This year is no different, and we have an outstanding opening session. Just a quick reminder for that and for all the sessions, we value your questions, in particular early and concise questions. We welcome those to the email address questions. It's on your screen. We'll flash that up later during the day as well, questions@intelsummit.org.
Thank you, Louis. And let me add my warm welcome to everyone, and thank you all for being here. Louis gave you highlights from yesterday. We are sure today will be just as good. Later today, you will receive an email, which is an event survey. It'll come to the email that you used for registration. We really genuinely appreciate your feedback. Please give it to us straight, because of course we use that to improve next year's summit. And for all of you planners out there, we can already tell you next year's summit is September 18th and 19th at the Gaylord National Resort and Conference Center. So we'll be going back to where we have traditionally held this conference. And I think I heard a couple of claps there. I don't know, this is a pretty nice venue. And certainly for all of our Maryland, DC residents, you're probably liking us being here. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsor partners and encourage all of you to take advantage of the opportunities to connect with our exhibitors today. I've already done a quick tour through. I unfortunately missed yesterday, so I've already done a quick tour through, and we've got some really good exhibitors out there, so I encourage you to walk through there. Now, we like to keep this short and sweet, so without further ado, let's get to our opening plenary.
Divergent Solutions is the core foundation for operationalizing and delivering creative, innovative, next-generation cloud, cyber, data, and digital solutions at the speed of change, enabling and preparing people, processes, and technologies for our customers to deliver secure, compelling experiences and advanced data solutions. Our team of experts focus on the next generation of cloud solutions, innovative cyber technologies, and secure data solutions. mitigating global risk, and building long-term resilience through Jacobs' industry-leading solutions, and accessing the global digital ecosystem of our clients and partners to revolutionize next-generation solutions with technology platforms and software-enabled services. Boldly explore with us. Divergent Solutions.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Daniel Allmacher, Senior Director of Business Development, Capture of Cyber and Intelligence Solutions, Jacobs, to introduce our morning plenary.
Good morning and thank you. I'm Dan Allmacher from Jacobs Cyber and Intelligence Business Unit. And first, I would like to thank AFCEA and INSA for our enduring relationships, along with hosting this thoughtful and highly relevant topic, Strategic Intelligence Challenges. Many of us within industry provide intel service support of various forms to our intelligence community partners, and we are continuously seeking to improve the ways we provide that support, especially better understanding the evolving strategic intelligence challenges that we currently face. This morning, it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our moderator, Mr. Julian Barnes. He is an accomplished New York Times national security reporter covering the Central Intelligence Agency and the other members of the intelligence community, and his recent coverage entails the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Some of his written works include topics on such matters as the Havana Syndrome incidents, the collapse of the Western-backed Afghanistan government, and the growing threats of Chinese espionage and the American intelligence agencies' work to counter Chinese theft of our technology and intellectual property. Before joining the New York Times in 2018, Julian worked over 8 years with the Wall Street Journal as a Pentagon correspondent and spent 3 years in Brussels, a very difficult assignment from 2015 to 2018, covering terrorism and other NATO security threats. Prior to that, Julian was a Pentagon correspondent with the Los Angeles Times, and he was embedded with the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, during the initial invasion of Iraq while working for U.S. News and World Report. Of his many honors and accolades, Mr. Barnes' Overseas Press Club awarded Mr. Barnes the National Magazine Award in 2006 for an article he wrote on U.S. training efforts supporting the Iraqi security forces. Please join me in a warm welcome for our moderator, Mr. Julian Barnes.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to do the big panel this year, which is always the highlight of this, or my highlight of the summit. So we're going to dive right into it. We're going to skip the lengthy introductions because this audience knows who we're going to hear from today. I'm going to start with Ukraine, and David Cohen, Deputy Director of the CIA, you get the first question. Ukraine did a surprise incursion. 2 questions. Were you and your Langley colleagues surprised? And now that this is played out, what's the significance of what Ukraine has done?
I think I'll take the second part of that question. First off, just want to say it is a pleasure to be back here at this conference. I also agree this is a terrific conference and it's a terrific panel to be on with my colleagues here. So the significance, I think remains to be seen, but I think there are some interesting sort of early reflection. So, as folks know, the Ukrainians earlier this month staged an invasion into the Kursk region in southwestern Russia. They have, at sort of the height, it's moved back a little bit, but the height had taken about 300 square miles of Russian territory, a number of villages. I think the Ukrainians have been clear that they do not intend to annex Russian territory, in contrast to what Putin has claim for his intentions in Ukraine. But that being said, they are remaining in Russia. They are building defenses, and as best we can tell, and from our conversations, they seem to be intent on retaining some of that territory for some period of time. I think we can be certain that Putin will mount a counter-offensive to try to reclaim that territory, but that has not yet begun. And when it does begin, I think our expectation is that will be a difficult fight for the Russians. But what are the implications of this, right? I mean, I think one way to think about this is that Putin has believed throughout this war that time is on his side, that he will grind down the Ukrainians, that he will slowly take more and more Ukrainian territory once the front line was established in the east there, and that the support from the West will begin to wane, and that essentially his negotiating position will continue to strengthen. I think this pierces that. I think we have now a pretty good example of the Ukrainians being able to mount a quite successful offensive into Russia. They showed a lot of strength, skill, resilience in being able to do this. And now Putin is going to have to face not only the fact that there's a front line now within Russian territory that he's going to have to deal with. He has to deal with the reverberations back in his own society that they have lost a piece of Russian territory. And I think that has the potential to change the dynamic a little bit going forward. But it's still early days in this, and so we'll have to see how it all plays out.
Admiral Whitworth, my colleague Eric Schmidt at the New York Times has reported the U.S. and Britain are providing satellite imagery to Ukraine, not to necessarily help the advance go further, but to make sure Ukraine can protect its troops in this buffer zone that they've created. How does the recent events sort of change, or does it change, intel cooperation between the U.S. and Ukraine? And what more can we do in this kind of stage, or is it steady state?
Thanks, Julian. And again, great to be here. Thank you for the summit. So your question addresses, I think, the relevance of commercial imagery right off the bat. If you remember, if we go back 2.5 years, we made available commercial imagery through an outlet, a portal known as GEGD. And there were over 400,000 accounts in that particular portal. And so the availability of commercial imagery is sustained. If that is what they are using for purposes of this particular campaign, this limited campaign in Kursk, then I'll defer to them to confirm that. But the availability is always there.
Russia is punching back pretty hard in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine. We've seen a series of kind of infrastructure hits again, some civilian apartment buildings hit, journalists killed. Earlier this year, the U.S. government was saying, stalemate continuing. Russia was not going to be able to gain significant territory. Do we still think that's the case, David? What do you think?
Look, I think the attack the night before last that the Russians mounted on the energy infrastructure in Ukraine and against civilian targets, is sort of sadly more of the same from Putin, going after civilian targets, trying to cause essentially sort of widespread pain and suffering in Ukraine as the fall is now upon us, the winter is going to come, and he's going after the energy infrastructure. So I think we will continue to see those sorts of attacks. The Ukrainians, with the help of the United States and others, are constantly working to build their air defenses to try to address these attacks from the Russians. But in terms of the front line, look, I think the fighting now, and it has been for a period of several weeks or longer, has been focused on this city called Pokrovsk in the Donbass. The Russians are making some progress there. They're making progress there at extraordinary cost. The number of lives that they are wasting in this effort, quite apart from all of the military equipment and all the rest that they're throwing at it, is quite extraordinary for very small incremental gains over time. They may take Pokrovsk, they may not. I think the Ukrainians are continuing to defend. But at the end of the day, none of it is game-changing in a strategic sense. And I think we have assessed that throughout 2024 there will be some give and take along the front line. And I think we're going to continue to see that.
General Haugh, there's been a lot of intelligence cooperation between the EUCOM and the Ukrainians, between the CIA and the Ukrainians, as my colleagues at the New York Times have sort of detailed. I'm wondering what the NSA partnership has been like. And obviously, there's not a lot of detail you're going to give us on this, but in a high-level way, has it evolved over this course of this war? Is there stuff that your agency can provide to the Ukrainians that's helpful in their fight?
So, Julian, I think there are a couple areas that really we've started since pre-conflict. One of those is around secure communications. How do we enable secure communications with a partner that allows for intelligence sharing? So that's been an area that both NSA and Cyber Command have worked together with EUCOM to be able to ensure that we've got a set of secure communications that then opens up the range of options that will allow us to be able to work with a partner that is under daily cybersecurity threat. So we have worked that very closely with EUCOM. And then really our focus is really supporting General Cavoli. How do we get General Cavoli the information that he needs as part of the overall efforts from EUCOM and NATO to support Ukraine? And that's been our focus, and we really allow General Cavoli and his staff to drive the intelligence requirements for NSA like we would for any other combatant commander, and then we give him the tools that, based off of what he believes needs to be passed, it allows them the tools to securely pass that to Ukraine.
I'd like to follow up with you on this, but anybody can sort of weigh in. We have seen the technology transform the battlefield in Ukraine. Warfare is evolving faster than I've seen it in my career, whether it is drones or electronic jamming or a host of AI technology on the battlefield. How is it transforming intelligence? Obviously, the drone collection is part of it, and obviously the sharing is part of it. But how is technology changing intelligence collection, analysis in warfare right now?
So I would start with the one that I would highlight is the public-private partnership requirements. When we think about resiliency in Ukraine, a lot of that is around how they have leveraged Western companies to enable resilience, whether that's cloud providers, whether that's Starlink, and what does that mean for us as we start to think about a Western company that is in the middle of this conflict between two belligerents. And in there, the discussion yesterday that D&I had about what does the public-private partnership look like between the intelligence community and those companies as we see threats, either to Ukraine or to their infrastructure, and how do we close that cycle to ensure that they will be resilient, regardless of what Russia throws at Ukraine from that perspective.
So the DNI was talking a lot about the efforts that were underway across the IC on that, but kind of the undercurrent of a positive speech was cultural barriers to this. legal barriers, acquisition barriers, all things that make this difficult. Yet, we are in a period of time where it is the private sector that's having the biggest innovation. I wonder if anybody wants to jump ball question how your agency is trying to kind of break those barriers and how should we realistically think in terms of adopting new technology, breaking down resistance to bringing in private sector solutions?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we see some great advantage in partnering with our commercial partners that are out there. And it covers a vast spectrum if you think about what we do at the NRO. The most obvious is using commercial launch. The fact that we've had commercial launch has really reduced the cost of launch, which has allowed us to be far more flexible and get more capability up there. At the same time, over the last several years, we've seen a number of commercial companies develop viable ways of collecting imagery from space, as Trey mentioned earlier. Some of the data that came down was commercial satellites providing that data, and they're going into a lot of different areas. Our job is to go off and get the pixels, but also to integrate that into the actual architecture, so that we're relying on those to meet a certain portion of the mission, so that the national technical means can focus on other areas. And then there's a third aspect to it. As you're building thousands of satellites or you're building millions of computers for industrial purposes, that gives us the opportunity to go off and utilize those satellites and marry them up with different technologies so that we can go off and effectively and efficiently create a proliferated architecture, multiple satellites at a reasonable cost, so we can deliver to our colleagues at NGA and NSA data faster and provide more capability sooner and allow us to infuse technology faster than we could in the past. So commercial is playing an extremely important part in our present and into our future.
A quick aside that national technical means is my favorite euphemism for something that otherwise has a cool name of spy satellite.
Right.
Admiral Whitworth, I want you to jump in a second, but a quick follow-up for Dr. Scolese. Can you talk a little bit more about your decision of where you'll use commercial technology and where the national technical means is the exquisite spy satellites have to be used? Without obviously telling me I'm going to look at that launcher in Iran, in general, how do you break that workload?
So, the process is we sit down with our functional managers, General Haugh's team and Admiral Whitworth's team, as well as CIA and other customers, and look to see if there's a commercial solution that we can rely on, and we will. Typically, what we're doing is things that either require a certain degree of resilience so that they can operate through many more conditions than a commercial system would have to operate in, or we're looking for something that many people don't think is possible, basically, to go off and achieve that requires significant investment in order to not only develop the technology, but to deliver the technology and to make it work.
Admiral Whitworth, you were going to jump in, and
A couple points to add to already a really good thread here. On commercial integration, we absolutely partner with NRO to ask them, hey, we need pixels of this particular place on the Earth, and then they make sure that those pixels appear. On analytics, which is something I think sometimes isn't necessarily appreciated enough, we have made full investments. So we've announced Luno A and Luno B, which has a ceiling of $500 million for the analytical piece of applying commercial tradecraft and some of those pixels. This is actually at the hands of requirements stated by the COCOMs. As a combat support agency, we are integrated with those COCOMs. We listen to what they need, and in the case of INDOPACOM, they said, hey, we need some help with maritime domain awareness. We need some help with unregulated fishing and some of the things that are happening with draining protein out of some of our most important partners. What can you do in this regard? And that's where Luno A and B are really focused right now. It's a lot of money to ensure that someone else is doing the analysis. You would think that an analytical organization like NGA might have a problem with farming out additional contracts for analysis. Not so. There's too much work to be done. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've been leading the way on this analytical piece. On your question vis-a-vis innovation, there are two areas. You were touching on one, which is drone technology. And this is more of an academic statement. I've stated in the past, I think we're in the midst of a revolution in military affairs and RMA, and I think that the uncrewing of a lot of power projection and some defense with drone technology is very real. I've called it reluctant, but we're seeing a chipping away of some of that reluctance with things like the replicator program. For us, it's very, very important to keep an eye on this, and this would be a good segue to another form of innovation, which is artificial intelligence. For us, as you're going to experience a rapid increase in the number of terabytes coming from space over the next 8 to 10 years, we find it very important to our workforce and to those COCOMs and services that we support to ensure that we keep up. It's very unlikely that we're going to have additional eyes and additional minds dedicated to all of those terabytes, so we're going to need an edge. And we've chosen to truly invest in artificial intelligence. You may have heard of the program now called Program Maven, used to be called Project Maven. That's a program of record. And we are constantly evolving, ensuring that responsible tenets of artificial intelligence are being applied to this, what is effectively deluge of data.
And what have been the outputs of that, of Program Maven? Like, are you faster at the analysis? Are you able to do more? What is the benefit that you have seen on a day-to-day basis?
From a current perspective, the scale, there is no doubt that the scale has improved. It allows us to have a triage of a larger area than a human would be able to do just singularly. And that's very important. It allows then the human-machine team to use time effectively. I need you, if we're training, and this is what machine learning is all about, if we're training the model all the time to get better and better, you're still dealing with an entry-level analyst, imagery analyst in the model. But if we're using the world's best at NGA to train that model effectively, we can trust that when it triages something that it has seen over the course of the evening that might be anomalous, might be a problem, might be something that's out of place, then we go straight to it, as opposed to that long, arduous process of finding out for ourselves.
So AI is helping out NGA. When is CIA going to let ChatGPT run wild over 75 years of intelligence reports and come up with some great insights?
Well, so we're already using generative AI in our open source mission. So we have deployed a large language model to our open source enterprise that is, even as we sit here today, we have analysts who show up in the morning, their queries have been run, their prompts have been run, there has been summarization of open source information. It's much of the same problem. We have, in the open source arena, much too much information, and being able to sift through that in an effective way, generative AI is very useful. We are working to, and have in some respects already brought on generative AI into the high side, into the classified world. And I would just say, I think this is an area where we have a tremendous opportunity, because we have the ability both to leverage the models that are trained on open source information that everybody, including our adversaries, have access to. But this community has a repository of data that nobody else has access to. The 75 years of classified collection that we have and that our partners have collected across all the various intelligence domains. Figuring out how to leverage that data to train models using that data, to run models against that data, creates an opportunity and a comparative advantage for the intelligence community that our adversaries don't have. And I think as all of us are thinking about, and more than thinking about, actually working quite aggressively to bring AI into the classified networks, this is an area where I think we really do have an opportunity to make some significant advancements.
I tend to think that AI is going to be, at least initially, a research tool to bring a piece of information to a person that would be otherwise too time-consuming to get at, to pull up a piece of history or to pull up a photo from the middle of the ocean that is relevant, as opposed to an analytic leap that the human analyst wasn't going to make. Does anyone want to push back against that or agree with that?
I'm not going to push back. I would offer, in a way, history repeats itself, or sometimes it rhymes. I think the debate over AI that we're starting to move into is very similar to the debate we had in nuclear disarmament and deterrence with idealists and realists. The idealists might have you think, no, it's going to be 100% analytical and you're going to get something perfect as a result of AI. The realist, and I put myself in the realist camp, I'll speak just as myself, will be sober to how hard some very clever adversaries will work to maybe mess with the training data or use deception or some sort of tradecraft to thwart the machine learning that has been going on in the past. So there's going to be a real emphasis to stay current. Again, it's an entry level. I'm talking now about computer vision. I'm talking mainly about our approach of AI, which is very visual. Going to have to constantly work on this. I would ensure that we don't move into the idealist camp where it's going to be perfect every single time.
Yeah.
I think, Julian, from our perspective, we have used artificial intelligence in our architecture for decades. Generative AI brings a new set of tools that come with it. But I think in our history, what we've really been able to leverage artificial intelligence and algorithms and our data science has been around how do we focus analysts on the right piece of information. It accelerates them to the right piece of information and then gives them new tools to go seek other information that allows them to get a fuller picture. And inside there, we have each developed tools that will be useful inside of our architecture. Ours has been in many cases, built on natural language processing, has been an area that we've spent a lot of our time, both research with industry and others. Now, when we start talking about generative AI, I think what you're going to see is, from a community perspective, a collaboration on how we leverage those tools in a way that allows us to be more community-wide in our perspective and bringing data together and analytic insights together.
Deputy Director Abbate, I have left you here lonely on this panel without...
I'm okay with that. You can keep it that way.
You've delivered some interesting speeches on cyber intrusions, on ransomware attacks. I'm curious on how you see the landscape changing on this, if any of these tools that we've been talking about here today in terms of AI are helpful for the FBI in terms of combating that. How do you see that landscape changing?
I think that what we're discussing here in AI, generative AI, has been useful and will continue to be for all of us in defending against adversarial use of the same tools. And in fact, I would say that probably have the advantage in that regard right now. But on the other side, we do see adversaries of all sorts, the nation states and criminal actors as well, applying AI to carry out whatever they're seeking to do. On the criminal ransomware, AI has been applied certainly to, it's allowed less sophisticated actors to come into the space. So it's increased the number of those out there that are engaged in those type of criminal activities. It's involved those who are already engaged in it to increase their level, increase the volume of attacks they're doing in terms of trying to get into systems to steal information and to extort victims. So it's what we do across our entire mission portfolio. It's like, how do we adapt and stay ahead?
When obviously most ransomware attacks are by criminal groups, but it seems like they are often a tool of a authoritarian government, whether it's North Korea or Russia or someone else. How do you at the FBI look at it? Even if it is a criminal group that is attacking a hospital or a public school system, is this in some way a gray zone or hybrid tool of an adversary of the United States?
I mean, I think it encompasses all of that. We're kind of agnostic. We're trying to be preventative and work to protect people, organizations, companies, government from being victimized, no matter what it is, and stay in front of that. And in the unfortunate instances where the adversary, the criminal, does achieve the goal, we're going to go after him and hunt him down, attempt to bring him to justice in order to be preventative with respect to that actor in the future as well.
The Washington Post broke a story yesterday about Chinese penetration of internet service providers, suggesting that they were looking to get information about U.S. government personnel. This follows the Volt Typhoon intrusions, the Chinese penetration of the Microsoft cloud that went on forever. How do you see the Chinese espionage threat in the electronic cyber area right now?
It's a continuation of what we've already seen. I think it's a brazen aggressiveness on the part of the Chinese government that continues to escalate, and unfortunately, with all the efforts we've undertaken here collectively, including through the law enforcement side, it just has not had the deterrent effect that we would want to see. So I think that causes us to have to think hard about what steps need to be taken or actions to stop it.
General Haugh, your predecessor would bristle when any reporter would suggest the Chinese were better at gathering intelligence on the United States than the United States was, or better that the Chinese were better cyber operators than the United States. How do you assess the last year or so when we've seen this string of apparent Chinese successes in collecting information on the United States?
Well, I think, Julian, one of the things I would start with is why are we having this conversation is partly because the intelligence community has exposed these activities at an unclassified level, right? And that is our ability to bring together the public-private partnership of what do we know from an intelligence community perspective, what does industry know, and how do we close the vulnerabilities that China's taking advantage of? And the more public we make that also brings in our foreign partners and allows us to be able to counter that activity as quickly and as aggressively as we can, and using all the tools we have available to us. And whether that's in partnership with the FBI, whether it's in partnership with our foreign partners, but the area that we have to continue to close is how we collaborate with industry, both in how industry develops products, but how we communicate around vulnerability and closing those vulnerabilities as fast as we can. China has clearly made it national policy to be able to generate 0 days internal to their nation as a way that they're doing business. Whereas we have a process to expose vulnerabilities, to close those gaps and enable industry to ensure that we're protecting the American people and our allies. Those are two very different approaches, and it will take a collaboration between the government and industry to make it less advantageous for China to conduct these operations.
Is it taking longer for industry to kick out China from cloud networks than it was for a generation ago when we were on terrestrial networks to kick them out there? Is it harder to get the cyber intruders out today than it was 10 years ago?
I think what we have done is we've made a more complex attack surface. So if you look at the United States, we certainly have a complex attack surface. But for those operators, it also is an area that if they are successful, and particularly the approach that we exposed in Volt Typhoon, is being able to subvert identities on a network is a very difficult challenge for a defender to unpack. And that is where, as Director Abbate talked about, how we can bring technology to bear. What data do we need to collect when you're a network defender? How do you combine that data in a way that exposes activity on the network that is not normal? And how do you accelerate then the remediation of that and the broader exposure? The area I think we can continue to work together is the more rapidly that industry will talk to us makes it more likely we're going to be able to combine data. And I think those are the things that we're spending our time on and building our partnerships through the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, is building that trust to accelerate this conversation.
I want to pivot momentarily to terrorism. It's terrorism that brought me into national security reporting, although I will say I was happy to pivot to great power competition because that is the stuff of the great spy novels. But we have seen a return of ISIS. We've seen a devastating attack in Moscow. We've seen an attack in Iran, both of which the U.S. warned their adversaries about. Director Cohen, I want you to sort of engage on the sort of what do we make of the return of ISIS, and is it a threat to our homeland?
Yeah, so let me broaden the frame
Please.
a bit and pick up on your comment about great power competition, because and I think as the conversation we've had this morning demonstrates, as a community, we take our cues from the policy community, and we have pivoted to increase our efforts against the PRC, against Russia, against Iran. Not to say that we weren't doing that before, but the great power competition is very much the focus of the policy community, is very much the focus of what we're doing across the intelligence community, what we're doing at the agency. We're also leaning in much more into technology for all the reasons that we've talked about. But that being said, counterterrorism remains a priority. It remains a no-fail mission, and we are continuing to invest in it. We're continuing to deploy resources, and we are paying a great deal of attention to the terrorism landscape, which I think today is more diverse, it's more diffuse, it is in some respects more complicated than it has been for many years. ISIS is clearly, I think, at the top of the heap today, but there is a sizable number of actors out there who are legitimate threats, often less sophisticated, less capable than what we saw 10 years ago at sort of the heyday of some of the more centrally directed terrorist organizations, but still obviously deadly in the examples you cited. But that being said, I do think it is worthwhile every once in a while to take stock of some progress in counterterrorism efforts. And so, coming here today, I was taken back. I was on this same stage in September of 2021, just after the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And the question was asked to the panelists about sort of what was the expectation for the terrorist threat coming out of Afghanistan now that the U.S. had left. And there were a series of dire predictions that I think ranged from between 6 and 18 months, Afghanistan would turn into a terrorist hotbed, essentially. But all the panelists also said, but we're going to do everything we possibly can to prevent that from happening. And over the last 3 years, we have, I think quite notably, worked as a community to take out Ayman al-Zawahiri, who was in a safe house in downtown Kabul in the summer of 22. We have also stayed engaged with the Taliban, been very clear with them that we will hold them to their commitment that Afghanistan, in the Doha Accords, Afghanistan will not become a launching pad for terrorist activity. We've been monitoring what they have been doing. And we have been engaging with them all throughout this period in various ways as they have, I think, taken on the effort in their country now to combat both Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K in Afghanistan. And so, this isn't a mission accomplished sort of thing, but it is worth noting that, Afghanistan today, these dire predictions have not come to pass. But we do see ISIS in particular as a significant threat. And ISIS-K, which is responsible for the terrorist attack at Kruse City Hall in Moscow, attack in Iran. We see ISIS-Core still having some capability in the Iraq-Syria region. And we see them plotting in Europe. So let me just, one last point, I'm going on for too long here, but I think this is another sort of notable event and frankly a CT success. So as folks probably remember, earlier this month there was press about a series of arrests in Austria and Vienna of 4 individuals who were plotting to attack a Taylor Swift concert. And they were found with explosives. They were found with bomb-making material. They had access to the venue. And they were plotting, I think the concert was the next day, before the day after they were arrested. They were plotting to kill a huge number, tens of thousands of people at this concert, including, I'm sure, many Americans, and were quite advanced in this. The Austrians were able to make those arrests because the agency and our partners in the intelligence community provided them information about what this ISIS-connected group was planning to do. And as a result, hundreds of lives undoubtedly were saved if the Kruse City Hall was a good comparator there. Those sorts of successes don't get a lot of attention broadly. I can tell you within my agency, I'm sure in others, there were people who thought that was a really good day. Not just the Swifties in my workforce, but seriously, the CT community is continuing to work very hard against these challenges, and we do occasionally make progress.
I feel like the thwarted attack against Taylor Swift got a little bit of attention. It's when you go after national icons,
Well, as well it should.
And I want other people to jump in, but just a quick follow-up, because you kind of mentioned the panel a few years ago, but there was a question that once we were out of Afghanistan, would we lose the ability to monitor ISIS and other terror groups there? Has it become, clearly you're doing it. Like, we've got Austria, we've got Iran, we've got Moscow as examples of warning, some heeded, some not. Is it harder to do now that you're not in Afghanistan, or is it harder to do with less resources? Or?
It's no question that it's harder to do when you're not, in the location. But that's what this community does. We figure out how to execute our mission, and even when it is difficult. And I think, I don't want to, leave the impression that we have as much visibility today as we had 5 years ago into what's going on in Afghanistan. We don't. But are we still able to to defend the homeland and to make and to unravel terrorist plotting? We not with perfection, but we are continuing to work on that really hard, and I think with some success.
Admiral.
I was just going to offer, on behalf of the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, and this would be congruous with what David was just offering from CIA. I think you've hit on 2 themes that are just constants that we're not going to take risk on. cybersecurity, and counterterrorism. Even though the Secretary of Defense has made it very clear a pacing challenge is China. He made it very clear that we also need to stay focused on the acute threat of Russia. All along, we're not taking risk when it comes to something as important as cybersecurity or counterterrorism. And so the points that he's made are very, I think, very real from an NGA perspective. I'll let everybody else speak to their own. We simply have to keep some of the tradecraft that we built over the course of 2 decades and not let that atrophy, even though it may not be on the front page of a newspaper. There are things and there are wins occurring in the background that are a testament to that tradecraft continuing.
Paul, how do you view, I mean, we had some reports of ISIS members crossing the southern border. They were intercepted or they were detained, and the FBI was on top of this. But how do you view the threat of ISIS to the homeland, vice the attacks overseas?
Look, I think it's been continuing, and I think it's significantly elevated now. It's something, as David, the Admiral, said, we have to stay hyper-focused on this and vigilant at all times. I think some have said wrongly that the terrorism threat had diminished or faded over time. From what we see, that's not true in any way, shape, or form. It's remained persistent and consistent, and it's significantly elevated again now, and that's not going away. So we have to stay on that, because that comes down to, of course, protecting human life and protecting and keeping people safe from physical harm. And the large-scale foreign terrorist organizations that have been mentioned here, among others, have never given up their goal or intent to strike us here and around the world and hurt and kill people. That has not gone away. In addition to that, there's the inspiration that seems to continue to proliferate with individuals here and around the world, drawing inspiration and being radicalized toward violence as a result of the violent ideologies that are, being pushed by these terrorist groups. So we see that every day. We get together each morning within the FBI and at the Department of Justice, and we talk about, along with colleagues here as well, regularly, what is the threat, across the board, but particularly in our counterterrorism efforts. And there's just case after case. The numbers are stark. If we look at the FBI case portfolio within our counterterrorism, we've got about 7,000 international terrorism investigations. That's individual cases, both here and around the world, from the extraterritorial perspective, and about 3,000 to 4,000 domestic terrorism type cases. It's a lot of cases. It's a lot of individuals out there. And though a lot of it flies under the radar, we're due to the phenomenal work that's being done across the community within the FBI, we are affecting disruptions and bring people to justice every day and preventing them from causing harm in the first instance or future harm. We just need to stay focused on that. That's the message here, because I don't see that threat going away anytime soon.
I want to move from the broad terrorism to Hamas and Gaza. It seems like we had over the weekend an exchange between Hezbollah and Israel that seems contained. Mm-hmm. Every time the news media writes about a wider war, threats of a wider war, it does seem that the parties all kind of step back, whether they're Hezbollah or Iran, not the Houthis, but so far, Iran wants to control the escalation and does not want to bring about a wider war. Is that going to last? What is your assessment of the risks there, David?
Look, I think this is as complex and combustible a situation as we have seen in many, many years. And so you are right that there have been episodes where people have stepped back from the brink, but I don't think anybody can be confident that the effort to control escalation is something that that any party in that region has perfect control over. Iran's playing a very dangerous game, right? I mean, to tie it a little bit to this terrorism conversation we were just having, that terrorist attack by Hamas was in many respects fueled by years of support from Iran. Iran is continuing to invest in and support a whole collection of Shia militia groups that are operating in Iraq and Syria. They are supporting the Houthis. They are supporting Hezbollah. They, as you noted, are I think want to avoid having this war sort of descend upon Iran, but they are all the while stoking tensions through their proxies in the region. I think we will. One of the things that we do, as an intelligence community, is help prepare the policy community to understand what's happening, so that this risk of an escalated regional war, which the consequences of which and the spin-offs of which I think are, you can imagine lots of different terrible scenarios, that we are understanding that as well as we can, so that when you have episodes like we had over this past weekend, and we've had on a number of occasions over since October 7th, our policymakers can help to tamp down the situation.
I'm going to keep you on the hot seat for two more questions. Does Iran want a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel or not?
I'm going to take a pass. What's your second question? I mean, I would say, look, I think I don't mean to be glib about this. I think Iran is broadly interested in continuing to keep the pressure on Israel, to state sort of a truth there. On the puts and takes on whether there should be a ceasefire or this war should continue, I think this is largely a question that is going to be answered by Hamas and by both the military and the political leader of Hamas, Sinwar, as he is there in Gaza trying to decide what he wants.
What about the opposite side of that equation? Does Netanyahu want a deal? Does his political reality prevent him from taking it? While there's been a lot of success at containing the wider war, we have not yet seen a resumption of hostage releases. We have not seen a ceasefire deal.
Yeah, look, I mean, we had a ceasefire in December that obviously Prime Minister Netanyahu signed on to. It resulted in release of, I think over 100 hostages at that time, and a period of calm. I think what we have seen, particularly, in the last weekend, there was some high-level negotiations that the Israelis participated in. Those have been continuing this week at a working level. I think we see, a seriousness of purpose from the Israelis as well as others.
Is there a new U.S. bridging proposal, and is it going to work?
There was a proposal that was put out by the president at the end of May that has been the foundation of the negotiation. There have been, updates to that along the way, but I'll let the negotiators deal with the negotiation.
I'm now letting you off the hot seat.
Thank you.
But continuing for a moment in Gaza, Admiral Whitworth, there's been a lot of sort of open source, journalistic kind of analysis of the war in Gaza using commercial satellite photos, using other techniques. How interesting from your vantage point is that? Have you learned things from what the open source community, what the sort of journalistic forensic analysis has given, or do you feel like we're just amateurs that are 3 steps behind what the big boys are doing?
I appreciate the question. I'm not going to be so impolite to say that you're amateurs or anything like that, because we take every report seriously. So let me answer this way. If a report from an open source analytical element suggests something that may foment violence or might be a problem, I have standing requirements for our people to take a look at that. What's the truth? Take a look at the ground with the advantage that we have with our analysts who have 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and with this great collection that we have with the United States, and let's make sure that that's correct. And so we have imposed a validation index. It's very simple. 1, invalid, 5, valid. Because our readership probably wants to know if that report, that open source report that might have an image involved, this is where I'm really talking about images, could foment some violence or bring a problem, stall some talks or something like that. And we need to make sure that's the real deal. And so we do some comparisons with the real world, and we apply our knowledge. So I hope that addresses your question.
General Haugh, the NSA's partner in Israel, 8200, has come under huge criticism of their failures around October 7th to give ample warning. This is, one of your close partners. Have you been working with them? How have you been working with them in the months since then to improve signals intelligence on Gaza, on Hamas?
So Julian, I'll just kind of take it one step higher than talk about any of the current ongoing activities. As we look at it, our focus is first and foremost on CENTCOM. Because when I look at the priorities we've set, we've got to make sure that we've got force protection as our focus within the region. So threats to U.S. forces throughout the region based off of what's occurring. So that's our number one. Number 2 is support to Israel. How do we enable the collective policy that is ongoing within both as executed by the department, and then our third approach is also to support allies in the region. Right? This, as David described, this is a very difficult situation throughout the region, and we want to ensure that all of our allies have a really clear understanding of what that threat looks like, particularly from Iran and the supported groups. So I think those are the ways we're looking at the challenge, and certainly we're deeply involved.
Dr. Scolese, I've left you down there but I wanted to return to the great power competition. I want to return to space. There was major headlines earlier this year about Russia deploying a possible nuclear weapon to destroy as a threat against satellites. I want you to speak a little bit about how you see the threat landscape and how NRO is reacting to sort of develop new satellites that can operate in a contested environment, that can continue to provide imagery and communications and other intelligence, even when you have threats of space nukes or other weapons up there.
Yeah, certainly. I can answer some of that clearly. Clearly, countries that want to do us harm or compete with us recognize what our reliance is on space. I mean, our civil society relies on it. Certainly our military and the intelligence community relies on it. So they're trying to deny our ability to operate in space. And Russia and China are the 2 most capable countries in doing that. They have clearly demonstrated that they have weapons that can take us out with their ASAT tests that were both less than well thought out and created serious issues for all of the spacefaring nations. And as you mentioned, Russia is even pushing more into more destructive capabilities in space. China, however, represents a different threat. They're a very capable country. They're technologically smart, they're economically strong, and they're developing capabilities across a spectrum of systems, and they're competing with us. We are, right now, the strongest capability in space. We have the best ISR in space. But China is coming on strong. So that represents an additional threat to what we're doing. So I would say, when you look at it in that sense, China is the more diversified threat, and Russia is a very, very focused and also capable threat that we need to deal with. So what are we doing about it? There's a number of things, and I would probably say that one of the things we're doing is innovating, diversifying, and becoming flexible. So what's obvious is we're proliferating our architectures. That complicates the calculus of anybody that wants to do us harm, because now you have many more satellites up there that one has to deal with. The good thing is it also provides more capability. We're delivering information faster to our partners, and we're delivering. It's giving us the opportunity to deliver new technology faster as we go along. As an example, from last June roughly until the end of this calendar year, we'll have launched more than 100 satellites. So we are actually putting that architecture in space. And we have prototypes up there that demonstrate how well it can do. So we've already sort of changed the thinking of Russia and China along those lines. But we talked about commercial earlier. Commercial adds an additional capability, and we have a true commercial enterprise in this country. So they are off doing their own thing. They're bringing different technologies in some cases. They're bringing in flexibilities that we didn't have that can be exploited by NGA, NSA, and others to make that information more available. And then when you look at the ability to innovate faster, we have two things. I mean, clearly we invest in technology. We take advantage of the technologies that industry has, but also we have great partnerships that allow us to do that. There's many partnerships. The Space Force is absolutely critical. We work with them, Space Force and Space Command. We're operating in the space domain. We have to work together. We have to understand what's going on there. We have to coordinate so that we can deliver that capability reliably as we go along. Our international partners are absolutely critical. It was unheard of to think of NRO launching from any place other than Cape Canaveral and Vandenberg. We have launched not only from different spaceports in the U.S., but from different countries, 2 different continents. That gives us a lot of flexibility and shows a strong partnership. The other is we have an incredibly diverse workforce that is not only brilliant, but they also bring a diversity of different ideas. And we're refreshing that all the time, as all of us do. I think about the interns we had this year. Not only are they diverse backgrounds, but diverse technological skills. And they were eye-wateringly brilliant. Some of the ideas that they brought in, as General Haugh mentioned, we've been using AI for years to allow us to deliver the capability that we need to deliver. But they have even newer ideas about how we can go off and do it. So I would say, yes, we have a threat, but at the same time, we are continuing to advance our capabilities, and we intend to stay ahead.
Admiral Whitworth, real quick, because I got to get to an audience question.
I'll just dovetail two additional gerunds to the list that Chris mentioned, educating and collaborating. On educating, a lot of Americans don't realize that NGA analysts, we've got over 15,000 people, but the analysts don't just look down at the Earth, they also have a tendency to look up and discern good behavior from bad behavior. And that is something that is growing in terms of its importance right now. It was so important that we actually changed our motto. So we actually say the words "from seabed to space." Two extremes that most Americans can't see, yet if they're messed with, can change an American way of life. We don't talk much more beyond that, but it's very important that we educate people to know that, yes, we are looking up and we're discerning good behavior from bad behavior. Secondly, collaborating. Collaborating, I think, is made manifest in something called the Joint Mission Management Center. As our constellation, which is growing at a robust rate, involves more and more elements of the DoD and the IC, we established, and we're still working this, but it's been now an initial operating capability known as the Joint Mission Management Center. It's located inside of NGA, partnered with U.S. Space Force and representatives from NRO, all the COCOMs, the services, as a place to collaborate so that the worlds don't collide, they actually collaborate and we understand each other. JMMC for short.
We had a question come in from the audience on election security, election meddling. Paul, we've had in the news an Iranian hack and attempted dump against the Trump campaign. ODNI has assessed that Russia is again meddling in the campaign. Russia to favor Trump, Iran against Trump. What do you see the threat landscape? Can we expect more from Russia, more from Iran in the 75 days to come?
I don't know what we can expect, but we're anticipating that type of behavior, and we're well prepared for it. This is something that has been going on for a long time. It's evolved in recent years with in the online, in the cyberspace. It took, I think, government a moment to catch up with that. But since that time, dating back to 2016, around that time, we've really come together collaboratively, and I think we've made great progress and positioned, the enterprise to stay ahead of the threat, and that's reflected in the fact that, it's being identified and called out, and accountability is being brought to bear in that regard in a number of different ways.
General Haugh, two questions for you. Do you think China is going to stay on the sidelines during this election cycle, at least at the presidential level? And in the past, Cyber Command and NSA have been prepared to act to defend elections when they've seen Russian influence operations developing. Are you prepared to act again this year if you detect something?
So first, Julian, how we're postured. This is one of the many missions where we do benefit from having the dual hat partnership and relationship between NSA and Cyber Command. We stood up our election security group last November with first the priority to be able to generate insights on what the threat looks like, and then how we enable defense. We're looking outside our borders and looking from a foreign intelligence perspective to enable the organizations inside the United States to be able to disrupt. So whether that's FBI under FBI's authorities, DHS, and DHS's partnership with state and local, we are in a really good position. As Paul mentioned, this is now, from my perspective, the fourth election that both NSA and Cyber Command have been involved in. Our partnership across the federal government is just incredibly tight in terms of how we're looking at this and sharing information. So I think for us, we're first thinking about how we generate insights, how do we enable defense, and then how do we deliver options for disruption if we believe that that raises to that level. To your first question as it relates to China, the DNI did put out a very good product, and just encourage everybody to look at that. This is an example from the intelligence community to be transparent as to what we understand about these threats. And the overall assessment from the DNI that is enabled by the whole community is we do not see the PRC action to influence the presidential election. They may have interest in down ballot races. And as we see and refine that threat, that will come out through the DNI.
My last question.
Can I just add just one quick sort of historical perspective on this? So I was in this job in 2016. I took 4 years off and came back to it. But one of the things, and in 2016, as I'm sure folks know, we detected the Russians in various ways trying to influence the election, and the community dealt with it, tried to deal with it, but it was, it was much more ad hoc. The collaboration and coordination and focus on identifying threats to the election and addressing them using the full suite of authorities and capabilities of this whole community this time around it's such better shape than it was in 2016. Doesn't mean that our adversaries aren't going to try to affect the election. Doesn't mean they're not going to be successful in some respects. But we are much better postured as a community in 2024 than we were in 2016.
Since you jumped in, you get the last follow-up, which is this. Between the time that Trump announced the Iranian penetration and the public statement on it was several days. DNI talked yesterday about having DARPA tools to identify deep fakes. It seems like we are moving too slow in terms of warning the public, given the speed of information, which seems to be a missed lesson of 2016. Would you push back on that, or how would you improve the speed of information to the public?
Yeah, I'll definitely push back on that. So, I mean, in 2016, I think there was one sort of public announcement that the DNI, the FBI director, did, I think, on October 7th about Russian interference. That took a while to get out. There may have been a couple days before the DNI statement, I think a week ago Monday, about the attempted hack of the Trump campaign. I think we all, and others should weigh in here, we have an obligation to make pretty damn sure that when we put out information, when the DNI puts out information, that it's right. I think we do that as a community as quickly as we possibly can. But I think the information that has been routinely released by the community in this election season, I think there's plans to do more. I think the DNI has set out a schedule to do more. I think reflects a recognition that we have an obligation as a community to educate the public. And as events arise, I'm sure there will be, if necessary, additional information that gets put out. But accuracy has got to be at the top priority there.
We've gone over time, so please join me in thanking the panel for their time and their answers.
Julian, thank you so much, and a big heartfelt thanks to our panelists. That really was a terrific conversation. We will now take a 45-minute break. Please use this time to visit our exhibitors. Breakout sessions start at 11:15, lunch at 12:15, and we will regroup back here at 3 p.m. with General Gutlein. Thank you.